The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Emily Mullen, Executive Director of San Diego SHRM. I wanted to take a moment and thank you all so much for being a member of San Diego SHRM. Sincerely, our society is only as strong as its members, and it is because of you, especially in this day and age, that has allowed San Diego SHRM to continue to thrive and support our members during this really difficult year. We're so honored to have you a part of the San Diego SHRM community. On that note, the Board of Directors established the San Diego HR Community Fund to support members who have endured financial hardships this year and need support to remain a member of the San Diego SHRM community. Donations made to the fund have been from members helping fellow local HR professionals. If you've been laid off, in transition, or simply need support to remain a member of the San Diego SHRM community, we invite you to apply for assistance via the San Diego SHRM HR Community Fund on our website. I would like to remind everyone about the dedicated San Diego SHRM HR Career Center. If you have an open HR position and would like to get exposure with San Diego's most qualified HR talent, please support San Diego SHRM by posting the position on our site. I also want to acknowledge our annual partners, whose support has allowed us to continue to provide valuable programs and education in 2020. We are very thankful for their support, especially this year. Our sustaining sponsor, MediExcel Health Plan. Our advocate sponsors, Cigna and Scripps and Toastmasters International. And our empowerment sponsors, Benefit Pro Insurance Services, Mint, Optimum Comp Advantage, Paylocity, Pettit Cohn and Gracia Lutz and Dolan, Roth Staffing Companies, and ScholarShare 529. I would also like to give a huge thank you to our sustaining sponsor, MediExcel. We will play a quick intro video from MediExcel. The audio is only available through computer speakers, so please turn your computer volume up. After the video, Gustavo Garcia from MediExcel is going to provide some welcoming remarks. Great. Gustavo.
Thank you, Emily. I just want to take a minute to thank Emily and Tamara for putting this event together. We're a part of other, type of networking and business development chapters right now, and some of them have been really inactive because of COVID. And it's nice to see that Emily and Tamara have kept everyone engaged and have continued to put events together in spite of everything that's going on. So we're really grateful for that. And I'm sure that a lot of you are right now in the middle of benefit season. You've probably already started to get your renewals, or you're maybe shopping around right now looking for something that's really competitive, something that you know is going to be offering your employees the best value out there. So we just want to do a quick refresher about MediExcel. We're a cross-border health plan. We work with businesses in San Diego County. We offer most of our healthcare delivery in Mexico. We did roll out some new services this quarter, which include $0 virtual care visits, mail order pharmacy refills for select medications, and we have contracted with Hei-ock for urgent care services within San Diego County. All of these services are really popular right now because of COVID. You're seeing people want to leave their house a little bit more if they don't really need to. So the virtual care, being able to get your medications through the mail, or if you need an urgent care visit, having the provider come directly to your home, these are things that are really popular. And for employers, we're starting to add additional new benefits for them where we have new plan options available that don't require a minimum contribution amount. So if you work for a company that is struggling a little bit right now because of the current economic situation, we do have health plans available that don't require a contribution from the employer and that are also really flexible. And we'll write down to one employee, even if you just have one employee that's interested or that you want to get coverage for. If you would like to find out more, visit us at mediexcel.com. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Gustavo. Thank you so much for your support. And I also wanted to mention that you create partnerships with brokers, that it's not necessarily there to replace your broker, but something that you could add in addition to make sure that employees are taken care of. So thank you so much, Gustavo, and the entire MediExcel Health Plan team. We really appreciate your support. I want to make a quick mention of our upcoming events. On Thursday, November 12th, we have another HR happy hour, which is going to be a Thanksgiving recipe share. On Friday, November 13th, we have our 5th annual HR Career Day, which is very exciting. This was an event typically held in the spring that we postponed and moved into a virtual offering in the fall. We're looking for HR professionals to serve as mentors to connect with students who are interested in learning more about HR as a career. And if you know college students who are considering HR as a career, please invite them to attend. It is free to register. And finally, on Wednesday, December 9th, we're going to have another HR happy hour in lieu of our annual holiday mixer. And some of you may not realize, but San Diego SHRM is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. And this milestone year is definitely not the way that we thought we would celebrate. But we hope you can join us on December 9th to virtually celebrate our 75th anniversary, to honor and recognize our volunteers of San Diego SHRM, and of course, to celebrate the end of 2020 in style. All of these events are free of charge for members. A reminder that recertification credits will be emailed after the webinar and will be available in your member portal in our website. Please note that we are experiencing some technical issues with our website this week, but you will receive the recertification credits by the middle of next week at the latest. It's now my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, Dr. Hei-ock Kim. Dr. Hei-ock Kim is the Executive Director of the Kim Center. She's dedicated 12 years to nonprofit administration in social progress and environmental conservation and spent 30 plus years as an educator. Hei-ock's former career as a classical pianist further fuels her entrepreneurship, collaboration, and leadership skills. A graduate of Princeton University and the Juilliard School, Hei-ock Kim received her doctorate in piano performance from Catholic University of America. Hei-ock serves on the board of Workforce Ventures, increasing workforce participation through income share agreements. She is a member of the San Diego Women's Commission, MANA, Women in Public Finance, and Lawyers Club. She's frequently called on as a subject matter expert, including for ABPS and Ashford University. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kim.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily, and a huge shout out to San Diego SHRM for bringing this really critical issue to the forefront. I would like to invite audience members to send questions as you think of them, and I will try to answer them as we go, but I'll also leave time at the end. Next slide, please. So my goals today are to introduce you to the Kim Center, to clarify the concept and the impacts of workplace equity, and support your role as HR professionals in accelerating the achievement of workplace equity. I'll use the Kim Center's signature Gender Leap tools as points of reference. Plus, we'll have 5 polling questions. And by the way, the Kim Center is currently inviting companies to become Lighthouse customers for parts of Gender Leap. So I'll have my contact information again at the end if you want to get in touch about preferential pricing and early access to new developments. The Kim Center is a nonprofit, and our mission is to accelerate the achievement of equal status for all genders at work. We focus on multiple intersections, including race, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, and sexual orientation, which means we do address equity for LGBTQIA+ and gender non-conforming populations. But we do prioritize women because they're the largest marginalized group in every population. And most importantly, they're the only group whose equitable treatment benefits all other groups. It's kind of a superpower. We were commended with a joint California state resolution, and we're spearheading the country's first ever Workplace Gender Equity Day. Adopters so far include the state of California and 8 cities. Our guiding principle is that when companies or regions unite around common goals, we get systems change. To this end, we formed the Gender Equity Collaborative. Currently, it's almost 40 companies that we invited from around the states that align with the workplace gender equity mission. As you can see, they come from a range of, oh, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to tell you to advance the slides. Could you advance a couple more? Here we go. I'll get back one, please. Okay. As you can see now, they range in from in sectors and industries, all the way from WD-40 company to San Diego County Treasurer tax collector to Dialogue Tech to Paylocity. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So at this point, I want to make sure that I'm clear about what I mean by workplace equity. When people enjoy equal status, it means no matter who you are or what your background is, your contributions are valued, recognized, and rewarded for what they're worth, and everyone is judged by the same standards. But we all know that's not reality. Equity is a necessary principle, and it is when employers do 2 main things. They first admit that there are inequities. Certain groups do not enjoy equal status. For example, in many cases, women of color are being pushed out of either industries or companies because their cultural values are viewed as unconventional. Or like primary caregivers who can't take advantage of advancement opportunities like others because company policies or practices don't meet their needs. The second step is that employers must take conscious steps to even the playing field. And that's what we're going to talk about doing today. Next slide, please. It's also really important to recognize that people who live at multiple intersections of marginalization face even greater challenges. Kimberly Crenshaw is a pioneer in the discussion of intersectionality, and she puts it very poignantly. She says that it's being impacted by multiple forces and then abandoned to fend for yourself. Next slide, please. So here's our first poll question. I wanted to take a moment to find out where we all are in terms of workplace equity initiatives. Does your company have a formal initiative?
Dr. Kim, it looks like we have 13% yes, 63% no, and 25% we're just starting one.
Okay, thank you. Kudos to the ones who are starting one. I'm glad to have all of you here who don't have one, and kudos to those who have one. I do have another question for you all, so we can put this information together. If you would advance to the next slide, thank you. My next question is, do you have a formal budget for your workplace equity programs? And if you don't have a program, go ahead and just mark no.
All right, it looks like 14% yes, 86% no, and 0% no, but I was asked to make the case for one.
Okay. So this gets at how serious your leadership is about workplace equity. It's one thing to have a program, it's another to put it in the budget and apply resources to it. Dedicating money indicates sincerity. If you're here at this webinar, you already know that workplace gender equity is important. But did you know that it's urgent? Just on the social justice front, when I founded the Kim Center 4 years ago, the prevailing prediction was for closing the pay gap was 100 years. Excuse me. Now that we have better data, the World Economic Forum just put out a prediction of 257 years, which is kind of a poignant commentary on today being Latina Equal Pay Day, 22 months later than, in other words, it would take 22 months longer for Latinas to make what men are making. Next slide, please. But this fact also impacts company performance, and I'm sure that's where you all live right now. So let me ask you, how many women thought about leaving your company today because of discrimination? You need to know the answer, because when women have one foot out the door, they are not being as productive as they could be. They're losing motivation. They could be distracted by financial and or emotional stress resulting from unfair pay or the company environment. For example, women actually experience depression at twice the rate of men when they're aware of a pay gap, and it makes no difference how much money they make. This will ultimately impact your retention. So what can you as human resources professionals do? First of all, you know that leadership buy-in, even though it's key to cultural transformation, is often a tricky road to navigate. This is pretty common because the gender equity movement, I'll admit, actually suffers from a lot of nebulousness and confusion. And this translates to risk, and risk stalls action. This is why we're here today. Next slide, please. You can be instrumental. Help leaders answer 3 questions that over 100 employers told us they need to have answers to before they act. First one is, what does gender equity look like? Second one, how do I measure it? And lastly, how does it benefit my company? This last point is especially useful when you want to convince your leaders that your initiative deserves a budget. Next slide, please. So let's address this first question. What does gender equity look like? One of the most obvious indicators of equity is representation, literally what company faces look like. Next slide. Has your company talked about this, or are you relying on prevailing trends to guide you? So I'm going to administer our third poll question here. Looks like 100% have answered the local population. And by the way, if you thought there was no one answer and you just picked one because you needed to, you're right, because there are many considerations. So is your clientele or your audience concentrated in one geographic area? So is the local population your primary concern? Or is your clientele demographically homogeneous but geographically spread out? So are you serving primarily Latinas, for example, from around the country? If you were to choose the industry population, there's the question of, are you trying to reflect what the population currently looks like or what it should look like? Big question in industries like finance and tech. Next slide, please. You absolutely need to be asking yourselves these questions within the company and many, many more questions. The goal is to fully understand the extent and the drivers of inequity in your company. Whenever possible, you want to be able to quantify and measure your barriers before developing any strategies. This will give you the maximum efficiency and effectiveness, because otherwise then you're just throwing spaghetti against the wall. So this quote by Einstein is actually apocryphal, but I find it perfect. If I had 1 hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes defining it, and only 5 minutes solving it. The point is, if you really fully understand the situation, you only need 5 minutes to solve it. A lot of the solutions already exist, or they will present themselves, or the strategy for developing them presents themselves. So when you get to the point where you're ready to establish a system of progress measures, here's a tip. Don't try to create your own metrics. They already exist. Next slide. At the Kim Center, we took the academically rigorous route to develop the gender leap assessment. We decided to research metrics not only that are being used in the field, but that have demonstrated measurable impact. And by the way, the principles that I've got listed here are not unique to Gender Leap. They're essential for any program. So by demonstrated measurable impact, I mean, for example, if you were measuring levels of microaggression, that's actionable data. That's in the literature as having shown you the basis for creating education to reduce microaggressions in your culture. On the flip side, if you're measuring, say, participation in an employee resource group that doesn't have specific goals for systems change, you're really only probably identifying how many people actually align with that group, but there's not a lot of actionable data toward creating an equitable culture. The third point I have up here is to combine data from the company side and the employee feedback. This, only by cross-referencing these two data sets will you get a comprehensive narrative. So that includes the more two-dimensional data like what is your leadership representation, what are your policies, and then the robust employee feedback is more like if your women of color or non-conforming genders are working harder than men to prove their worth. These are questions that you can ask. They're qualitative to some extent, but it's possible to measure them quantitatively and then track that change over time. Which brings me to the point of when you're collecting data and you're deciding on your metrics, it's critical to choose a consistent set that you can track over time. This has been actually one of the challenges of the gender equity movement. Over the last 60 years or so, we have pretty slim data on progress. We have, for example, changes in salaries, but we haven't been tracking changes in what kinds of access barriers there have been or for whom. So we're just relying on anecdotes or general impressions to decide whether or not things are getting better. And that's something I hear a lot. Well, things are better. Yes, they're getting better. We can vote. But we're still hearing the same kinds of stories. I mean, Me Too really highlighted that when it came out last year. We're still hearing the same stories that our parents told, that our grandparents told. The last point seems obvious, and it probably is to many of you, anonymity and confidentiality. You need the trust of your employees in order to find out what they're really thinking, and you need to know what they're really thinking in order to make change. Next slide. So since so many of you indicated that you either don't have an initiative or you're just starting one, I wanted to address how you could start. Let's say you don't have a budget or you have low commitment from your leaders at this point. You want to answer very specific questions about your company. Whatever you end up deciding about whom your employee makeup should reflect, you should ask yourself, does our leadership reflect that makeup as well? And remember that we need a minimum of 30% representation, 30% to move the needle. So we don't want to put one Black trans woman on a team of white men and call it done. Second question. There are many more questions, but the second one that I'm pointing out here is, do you have comprehensive work-family policies, childcare referral services, on-site or near-site childcare or vouchers, dedicated lactation facilities, paid family leave? A lot of these are obvious, flexible schedules, flexible spending accounts for dependent care. You want, whatever it is, you want something that you feel you can consider to be comprehensive. Third question. Do we have a strong internal labor market? Are we hiring from within? Are we posting our jobs internally? Do we have management training programs? And does our team have the technical skills to deliver beyond compliance? If you're implementing formal or informal sponsorship programs or networking programs, blind screening of interview candidates, or diverse interview panels, can your team execute this with skill and effectiveness? So, can they, there are a lot, because there are a lot of questions to answer. So if you were to go the blind screening route and remove all the names from resumes, there are differing camps in how to handle something like this. If you remove all the names, then you have complete anonymity. But if you're trying to make a concerted effort to recruit more and bring in more diversity, does removing the names hamper that? On the other hand, there are a lot of people whose names don't reflect their race or ethnicity. So you can see where the ball of yarn can get pretty tangled. You need people who can handle questions like this and have the understanding and perspective to deal with them in a knowledgeable way. Same thing with diverse interview panels. You don't want to keep calling on the same 3 people in your company if you don't have diversity to sit on every interview panel. Questions, you can ask questions like, well, maybe should we outsource the interview panel? And the last point is, how are we holding ourselves accountable? And this is your decision. Do we want to hold ourselves accountable publicly or just internally? But either way, you need measures. Next slide, please. So moving on to some key questions for your employees. You want to ask, at a minimum, questions like, do you believe this organization values your contributions? Do you believe, and the do you believe is the really important piece here, and you'll be comparing the percentage of responses between groups. So you may be talking about women versus men, or women of color versus white women, or LGBTQIA versus men, or women of color versus men of color. You want to be able to analyze at all those different intersections. So, second question, do you believe this organization would take a complaint seriously if you issued one? Are employees of different genders treated fairly in this organization? Do you believe you can openly use family benefits and still get promoted? And how many hours a week do you work? And you want an honest answer here. This is particularly telling because, as I mentioned before, employees whose worth is questioned, either openly or subtly, because of implicit bias, typically work longer hours to prove that they can compete. And this can take a toll. If you see significantly different responses between these groups and, let's say, white men, you may need to investigate this further. Next slide. And yes, we recommend a full pay audit. But at the very least, if you can at least evaluate by position, gender, and race and ethnicity, you'll have some really key points to go on. The Gender Leap assessment also includes zip code of residence, veteran status, and disability status. Next slide. I'll explain why I'm asking this question after I get your answers. Does your company track employee family leave use? Well, this is good. We have 90% yes and 10% no. It's not an insurance reporting requirement, so a lot of companies don't collect it. But Gender Leap tries to track this with our clients because even though it's two-dimensional, it can provide some important signals into whether taking family leave affects pay and advancement opportunities, beyond just simply taking the time off. So if a woman is taking 8 weeks off in a year, does that explain why she's still 3 managerial levels below where she probably ought to be? Or is it insignificant? Is she right on track? These are things you want to be able to understand. It can also tell you if men are taking family leave, and if not, are there cultural barriers within your company? The aggregated data can also help us as a society determine how close we're getting to equalizing unpaid caregiving responsibilities between women and men. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to address the second question that leaders want answered before they act. How do I measure gender equity progress? Next slide. Again, I'm using our Gender Leap playbook as a point of reference, but these core principles are across the board support the most efficient and effective plan, whatever tool you decide to use. 1, you want to target your strategies based on your evaluation results. 2, clearly outline roles and goals and timelines for all your stakeholder groups. And it could be different, within your company from what it is in another company, but it should include leadership, staff, maybe customers, maybe your board. If you're an academic institution, it might be your professors versus staff. It might be housekeeping, managerial staff. Either way, you need to have that outlined for every group because you want buy-in from everybody. A Harvard study showed that 75% of diversity trainings are failing. This is not a good statistic. And a large part of that is because a lot of the trainings only target one group, usually managers. In case you're curious, the other reasons include any mention whatsoever of compliance, and making it mandatory. Point number 3, start with methods with demonstrated success. And I referred to that earlier, the reasons for this earlier. You're going to have plenty of time and plenty of call for creativity down the line. So accomplish as much as you can with what you already know works. And we have some resources on our Gender Equity Wiki at kimcenter.org. They're available for free. We try to put as much wisdom as we can in there. Lastly, schedule your reevaluation. Ideally, you're going to be scheduling your assessment on an annual basis, perhaps with quarterly pulse checks, but that annual assessment needs to be coupled with a reevaluation of your playbook. You want to put when you first form it, you want to put strategies for, on a 5-year level, maybe a 10-year level, but definitely include short-term milestones. So what do we want to accomplish in 6 months to a year? And then that will give you the opportunity to couple that with your new assessment data after a year and really see how you're doing. That's the measurable tracking. Next slide, please. Okay, last poll question. What do you think are the bottom line consequences of inequitable work environments? Everybody knows that it's a significant impact on the bottom line. That's awesome. That makes me very happy. I'm going to give you then some arguments to take to your leadership. It's the most important question that leaders need answered before they act or commit resources to an initiative. How does gender equity benefit me/my company? Our Gender Leap assessment motivates company leaders to action by showing them hard data, which is what I've been talking about all this time. That data shows how gender equity is helping the bottom line. And again, I'll remind you that we're talking about gender equity at multiple intersections. So that also includes race and ethnicity. It is the diversity and inclusion issue, but you could have diversity without equity. On the other hand, equity fuels diversity. It brings in people because they know that they will be welcome and that they can succeed. Next slide. So remember that question I asked you earlier, how many women thought about leaving your company today because of discrimination? Next slide. And I said that you need to know. Next slide, please. Being able to say none or very few to this question directly gives your company a competitive edge. Wouldn't it be great if you could say that no one thought about leaving your company? So, because of discrimination, let's be clear on that. So some key contributors to the bottom line. It opens you up to a larger talent pool. It allows you to achieve, your employees to achieve a greater innovative mindset. I think you've probably heard the phrase innovate or die. Accenture came out with a report recently that companies with more equal status among their employees have 6 times more innovative mindset. You'll have fewer discrimination lawsuits, and this seems like an obvious benefit, but consider the actual costs. They can range from $200,000 to $6 million per lawsuit. And you'll have higher employee retention and productivity than your competitors. Next slide. A 2018 Gallup poll revealed that the cost of lost productivity or disengagement averaged about 1/3 of an employee's salary for every year that they're there. So for every year a woman is, or someone who is of a marginalized gender or race or ethnicity is unhappy, you could be losing about 1/3 of what you're paying them. And then when they leave, you'll lose another third equal to, you'll lose another chunk equal to 1/3 of their salary because turnover costs can total that much. And they include, beyond the actual costs themselves, lost knowledge, the time that you spend finding a replacement, and then the time that you have to spend getting their replacement up to speed. And I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new here, but to be able to just outline this clearly gives you a really solid basis for argument. So all in all, and this is your bottom line here, all in all, having gender equity in your company can translate to at least a 15% competitive advantage. Plus, I love hearing this. Women are better leaders in crisis. So, oh, I'm sorry, next slide, please. 15% more profitability. There you go. Women are better leaders in crisis. So gender equity could actually be really critical to your company's economic recovery from the pandemic recession. Next slide. Apologize for my voice. The dryness is getting to me. Accountability also affects your bottom line, benefits your bottom line. You want something with nationally standardized criteria because this allows your company to self-identify across the country as moving the needle to potential employees, customers, or investors. And this can also give you preferred vendor status with other companies or even municipalities, a lot like B Corp or women-owned business federal contracting. GenderLeap is a fully integrated system, so our accreditation is based on GenderLeap assessment results, and this eliminates any mystery about what the qualifications are. It's also rigorous, like B Corp. B Corp is very rigorous because really we're fighting the good fight against lip service. You can also hold other companies accountable. If you make your priorities clear to your supply chain, for example, that sets you up as an industry leader. Next slide. Okay, so I hope I've given you some useful tools to clarify your goals and actions toward workplace equity. And remember, this is a long-term commitment, as in 5 to 10 years to establish a solid upward trend, depending on where you start from. There's very clear research indicating that in instances where diversity is newly being introduced, it can actually cause conflict within 2 years. But you can't let that discourage you because at the 12-year mark, for example, it increases the stability, the overall stability of that community. I just want to emphasize that society is at an inflection point today. Today, there's a lot of attention toward equity that hasn't been happening before. I'm not overstating it when I say that you, as HR professionals, can have the power to change the future. I've already mentioned several benefits to companies, individuals, and regions, but here's a last bit of niceness. Working mothers are more likely to have daughters who are employed, supervise others, and have higher annual earnings. Next slide. If you would like GenderLeap to accelerate workplace equity at your company, please get in touch. I'd be happy to just talk or investigate what your needs might be. And as I mentioned, we're excited to be working with Lighthouse customers right now. They get preferential pricing and early access to new developments. I also encourage you to apply for our Gender Equity Collaborative. The application is at kimcenter.org, and companies pledge to care about gender equity, share resources to support the mission, and dare to make change. Again, I'm Hei-ock. If you're going to call me, it rhymes with Mayo. Thanks for joining me, and thank you again to SDSHRM. Please feel free to send questions.
Great. We don't have any questions as of right now. If you do have any questions, please go ahead and submit them in the question box. And while we wait for those, I want to thank Dr. Hei-ock for speaking to our group, for presenting this information. It's very important, and we appreciate the time and thoughtfulness, thoroughness that you put into today's presentation. We know you gave it a lot of care, so thank you. I also want to thank Gustavo and the MediExcel team for their continuous support of SDSHRM. A friendly reminder again that recertification credits will be emailed out by the middle of next week, and you will be able to also access them in your member portal on our website. I don't see any other questions that have come in, so thank you all so much for joining us today. Please stay safe, healthy, and positive, and we hope that we will virtually see you at our upcoming events. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.